The declaration came not with tears or trembling hands, but with the cold, clean finality of a guillotine blade. It was a Tuesday evening. The scent of the rosemary chicken I'd roasted for dinner still hung warmly in the air, a stark contrast to the ice now forming in my veins. Lena was perched on the edge of her cream-colored sofa, her posture perfect, her manicured hands resting calmly on her knees. She didn't look like a woman about to dismantle 8 years of marriage. She looked like a CEO preparing to terminate an underperforming employee. "It's over, Daniel," she said. Her voice was even, devoid of any emotion I could recognize as sadness or regret. "I've given this a great deal of thought, and this is what I want." She leaned forward and placed a single stark white folder on the coffee table between us. The wood of that table was reclaimed barn oak. I had sanded, stained, and sealed every inch of it myself over one long, satisfying summer. "These are my terms," she continued, tapping the folder with one blood-red nail. "I've already had my lawyer draw everything up." I didn't reach for it. I just watched her, the stranger who wore my wife's face. Lena, whose laugh had once been my favorite sound, whose ambition I had so fiercely admired, was now looking at me as if I were a problem to be solved, a nuisance to be cleared away. Seeing my hesitation, a faint condescending smile touched her lips. She was more than happy to elaborate. "I'm keeping the house," she began, as if stating a simple, unchangeable fact of nature. The house my father had co-signed for, the one whose garden I'd planted with heirloom tomatoes and lavender, because she had said she loved the smell. "I'll be taking 70% of our joint savings and investments, and I'll require spousal support for a period of 5 years. My career trajectory has been paused to support ours, and that needs to be compensated." It wasn't a negotiation, it was a pronouncement. A list of edicts handed down from a ruler to her subject. When she finished, she leaned back, crossing her legs, a smug, victorious certainty settling on her features. "I don't want this to be ugly, Daniel," she said, and her voice took on a syrupy, pitying tone that was far worse than her coldness. "Let's be realistic. You're a high school shop teacher. You make a decent, honest living, but you can't possibly afford a real legal fight. My attorney, well, let's just say he's a pit bull. He'll bury you in motions and discovery requests. The legal fees alone will bankrupt you long before you ever see the inside of a courtroom. It's better for you, smarter, to just agree to the terms and walk away. Start fresh." I sat there, the silence in the room roaring in my ears. I looked at the woman I had loved, had built a life with, had dreamed of a future with, and I felt nothing but a profound, settling coldness. This wasn't just about leaving, it was about eradication. She didn't just want to end our marriage, she wanted to loot it, to strip it for parts and leave me with nothing but the rubble. She saw my decency as weakness, my contentment as a lack of ambition, my love for my craft as a character flaw. Her ultimate weapon, in her mind, was my financial impotence. I let the silence stretch, watching her confidence solidify with every passing second. She mistook my stillness for defeat. Finally, I looked down at my hands, then back up at her, arranging my face into a mask of resigned surrender. I gave her exactly what she wanted to hear. "You're right."
The relief on her face was instantaneous and absolute. She had won. The humble, simple teacher was capitulating without a fight. She stood, smoothing the non-existent wrinkles from her tailored slacks. "Good," she said, her voice crisp and businesslike once more. "I'm glad you're being sensible about this. You'll be served with the official papers next week." And with that, she walked out of the living room, her heels clicking a triumphant tattoo on the hardwood floor she was now claiming as hers alone. Here is what Lena knew. She knew I was a man of simple earned means. She knew my salary from Jefferson High School down to the last dollar. She knew the balance of our savings account because she managed it. She knew I didn't have a rich family or a secret trust fund. She also knew I had an older brother, Julian. What she knew, and what her entire strategy was banking on, was that Julian and I had not spoken in over 5 years. The bridge between us wasn't just burned, it had been vaporized. Julian isn't a teacher. Julian is a predator. He is, without a shred of exaggeration, the most feared and expensive divorce attorney in the state. His name, whispered in the marbled halls of family court, makes seasoned lawyers break into a cold sweat. He doesn't win cases, he annihilates opponents. And in Lena's strategic calculation, my greatest potential asset was a ghost, a relic from a past I had apparently severed. Our falling out was a classic tale of clashing ideologies. It happened after our parents died within a year of each other, our mother succumbing to a broken heart after our father's sudden passing. They left behind the family home, a slightly ramshackled yet beautiful old Victorian in the countryside where we'd grown up. I, the sentimentalist, wanted to keep it, to preserve it, to fix it up, to have a place where our scattered family could gather for holidays and summers. It was a touchstone, a repository of a million memories. Julian, the ultimate pragmatist, saw it as a dormant asset. He wanted to sell it for top dollar, divide the proceeds, and invest the money. Sentimentality is a luxury the smart can't afford, Danny, he'd told me, his voice dripping with derision. That house is a money pit. Tear it down for all I care, but we're selling it. We had a bitter, vicious argument. Words were said that could never be taken back. He accused me of living in a fantasy world, of being a naive child. I accused him of having a heart of stone, of seeing everything in life as a balance sheet. It ended with me shouting that I never wanted to see him again, and him coldly replying, "The feeling is mutual, little brother." Lena had witnessed the toxic tail end of that falling out. She had held me as I raged and cried. She had seen the absolute, permanent-looking schism. In her grand plan, Julian was a non-factor, a nullity, a closed door. She was wrong. The 3 days after her announcement were a descent into a special kind of hell. The walls of the home we'd built together felt like they were closing in on me. She was right about one thing. I couldn't afford to fight her on her terms. The thought of losing my workshop in the garage, the garden, my financial security, everything I had worked for, it was suffocating. I felt a powerlessness I hadn't known since I was a child. On the 4th day, I hit rock bottom, sitting on the floor of my shop, surrounded by the ghosts of projects past. And from that absolute zero, a single, terrifying ember of defiance began to glow. It was a crazy, desperate, humiliating idea, but it was the only one I had. I swallowed every ounce of the pride that had cost me my brother for 5 years. I found his private cell number, a number I'd sworn I'd deleted, buried in an old email. My hand shook so violently I could barely press the call button. I expected it to go to voicemail. I expected a frosty receptionist. I expected to be hung up on. After 2 rings, a familiar, deep, and unsettlingly calm voice answered. Yes? Julian! My own voice sounded thin and reedy, a stranger's. It's Daniel. There was a pause so long, I thought the connection had failed. I could almost hear the calculations whirring in his brilliant, ruthless mind. Why would his estranged, sentimental little brother be calling? Danny? He finally said. The old nickname, spoken in that baritone, sent a jolt through me. What's wrong? And it all came pouring out. I told him about Lena's declaration, her predatory terms, her ice-cold delivery. I told him about the house, the savings, the spousal support. And finally, my voice thick with shame, I repeated her final arrogant taunt. You can't afford a lawyer to fight me. Another silence. This one was different. Heavier. I could feel the temperature drop through the phone. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. The initial surprise was gone, replaced with something I hadn't heard in years. It was the sound of a protective older brother.
It was the sound of cold, hardened steel. "She said what?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I repeated her words verbatim. "Okay," he said, and the word was a promise of violence. "When and where is the first court appearance?" "Next Tuesday, downtown courthouse, Department 12. I stammered. "I'll clear my schedule. Don't talk to her. Don't talk to her lawyer. Don't sign a single thing. Just show up on Tuesday. I'll meet you there." The line went dead. I sat there on the shop floor, my heart hammering against my ribs, a terrifying, alien feeling of hope blooming in my chest. Lena thought she had disarmed me. She had no idea she had just handed me the launch codes to a thermonuclear device. She was about to learn a very expensive lesson about the bonds of blood. The morning of the preliminary hearing dawned gray and miserably wet. A steady, cold rain slicked the streets, matching the atmosphere in my chest. I walked into the county courthouse alone, a solitary figure amidst the crowds of lawyers, plaintiffs, and defendants. I felt every bit the defeated man Lena expected me to be. I was wearing my one good suit, the charcoal gray one I reserved for funerals and the occasional wedding. Today felt like a gruesome hybrid of both. The hallway outside Department 12 was a river of anxious energy. I pushed open the heavy wooden door and entered the courtroom. It was a sterile, fluorescently lit space that smelled of lemon-scented disinfectant and deep-seated anxiety. Lena was already there, seated at the plaintiff's table. She looked like she'd stepped out of a corporate boardroom catalog. She wore a sharp, tailored pantsuit of navy blue, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe but elegant chignon. She looked confident, polished, and utterly in control. Next to her sat her lawyer, a man in his 50s with a florid complexion and a smug, self-satisfied expression that seemed permanently etched onto his face, Alan Pritchard. His name was on the papers I'd been served. They were leaning together, sharing a quiet laugh, a picture of casual victory. As I walked in, Lena's eyes met mine. Her smile didn't falter so much as it twitched, morphing into a look of patronizing pity. She probably expected me to look more haggard, more broken. I kept my expression a blank slate, a skill I honed dealing with rebellious teenagers, and walked to the defendant's table. I sat, placing my worn leather briefcase on the scarred wooden surface, and waited. Pritchard stood up and sauntered over, his gait oozing condescension. "Mr. Croft," he said, his voice a low, unctuous rumble. "I'm glad to see you're here. I trust you've had time to review my client's more than generous proposal. If you're prepared to sign today, we can make this quick and relatively painless." "I'm waiting for my counsel," I said quietly, not meeting his eyes. He actually chuckled. "Your counsel. Right. Well, good luck with that. Let's not drag this out for the court's sake, He gave me a patently false smile and returned to his table, whispering something to Lena that made her smirk. The bailiff called the court to order. We all rose as the Honorable Judge Evelyn Moore entered. She was a stern-looking woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing behind her spectacles. She took her seat, shuffled some papers, and looked down at the docket. "Croft versus Croft," she announced, her voice crisp. "Are both parties present and represented?" Pritchard was on his feet like a shot. "Yes, Your Honor. Alan Pritchard representing the petitioner, Mrs. Lena Croft." All eyes turned to me. I opened my mouth to speak, to say I was representing myself for the moment, to ask for a continuance, anything to buy time for a miracle I wasn't sure would come. But before a single syllable could leave my lips, the heady doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a resonant, echoing thud that made everyone jump. Every head in the room swiveled towards the sound. and there he was. Julian Croft didn't just enter a room, he took possession of it. He wasn't merely wearing a suit. He was clad in armor of exquisite Italian wool, a suit the color of a starless midnight sky. It was tailored to perfection, emphasizing his broad shoulders and lean frame. He moved with a predatory, unhurried grace, an expensive leather briefcase that looked like it contained state secrets swinging at his side. His hair was silvered at the temples, and his eyes were hidden behind a pair of designer sunglasses, which he slowly removed, folding them and tucking them into his breast pocket as his gaze swept the room. A wave of audible whispers rippled through the courtroom. I saw other lawyers lean together, their eyes wide. A clerk actually dropped a file. His reputation wasn't just known, it was legendary. He ignored everyone. His eyes, now revealed as piercing, icy blue, locked onto mine. He walked down the center aisle with the solemnity of a pallbearer, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. He walked directly to my table, placed a firm, steadying hand on my shoulder, and gave it a gentle, reassuring squeeze. Then he sat down beside me, placing his gleaming briefcase on the table with a solid, definitive click that sounded like the cocking of a gun. The sound seemed to break the spell. I looked over at Lena's table. The transformation was absolute and utterly glorious. All color had drained from Lena's face. Her perfectly composed mask had shattered into a mosaic of pure, unadulterated horror. Her jaw was slack, her eyes wide with the dawning realization of catastrophic miscalculation. She looked like she'd just seen her own coffin being carried into the room. Pritchard looked even worse. The smugness had been wiped from his face, replaced with a sickly gray pallor. He looked like a man who'd just been told his plane was missing both engines. He knew exactly who Julian was. He knew the sheer catastrophic firepower that had just aligned against him. He was a garden-variety pit bull who had just found himself staring down a Siberian tiger. Julian leaned over to me, his voice a low, calm murmur that was for my ears only. "Sorry I'm late, little brother. Traffic was hell." A hint of a smile played on his lips, a flicker of the old Julian I remembered. Then he straightened up, his demeanor shifting instantly to one of formidable professional authority. He looked directly at the judge. "Julian Croft, Your Honor," he said, his voice a commanding baritone that effortlessly filled the room. Judge Moore's eyebrows shot up towards her hairline. She knew the name. "Mr. Croft," she said with a note of wary respect. "This is, a surprise."
"My apologies, Your Honor. Scheduling conflict," Julian said smoothly, though the lie was effortless and unquestionable. Then he turned his gaze, slowly and deliberately, towards the plaintiff's table. He looked at the terrified Pritchard, then at the utterly shattered Lena. He gave them a cold, predatory smile that didn't reach his eyes. "My apologies for the delay," he said, his voice dripping with mock politeness. Then he looked directly at Lena, held her petrified gaze, and delivered the line that shattered her entire world. "He doesn't have to afford me," Julian said, his voice clear and cutting. "I'm his older brother." The game wasn't just changed. The board had been flipped over, the pieces scattered, and the rules set on fire. Without waiting for a response, Julian opened his briefcase, pulled out a thick, imposing stack of files, and the demolition began. "Your Honor," he began, his voice now all business, "we categorically reject the petitioner's initial proposal in its entirety. We find it to be predatory, drafted in bad faith, and wholly unconscionable. Furthermore, we are today filing a counter-petition. We will be seeking a full forensic audit of all marital assets and expenditures for the last 36 months. We will also be demanding the petitioner pay all of my client's legal fees, given the frivolous and vexatious nature of her claims." Pritchard tried to stammer an objection, but it died in his throat. He was a minnow who had just been told the ocean was now owned by the shark. The judge, her eyes wide, could only nod and make a note. The 5-minute hearing was adjourned. Lena practically fled the courtroom, Pritchard scrambling behind her, tripping over his own feet. Julian simply closed his briefcase, turned to me, and clapped me on the back. "Come on, Danny, let's go get a coffee. We have a war to plan." The battle, I realized, walking out of that courtroom with my brother by my side, was over before it had even begun. The 2 months following that first court appearance were a masterclass in legal warfare. Julian Croft doesn't practice law, he conducts symphonies of strategic annihilation. Lena and Pritchard thought they were coming to collect a surrender. Instead, they found themselves pinned down in the trenches, under a constant, relentless barrage. Julian's first move was a thing of terrifying beauty. He filed a motion for discovery that was less a request and more a declaration of total war. It demanded every financial document Lena had ever touched, breathed on, or thought about for the past 5 years. Every bank statement, every credit card bill, personal, business, hidden. Every work expense report, every Venmo and PayPal transaction, every receipt over $50. It demanded access to her personal emails and text messages related to financial matters. It was breathtaking in its scope. Pritchard, of course, filed a motion to dismiss it as overly broad, harassing, and a fishing expedition. The hearing was brief. Julian stood before Judge Moore and in calm, precise language outlined his justification. "Your Honor, given the petitioner's extensive financial demands and the respondent's belief that marital funds have been misappropriated, a thorough investigation is not only warranted, it is essential to the fair adjudication of this matter. We are not fishing, we are following a clear trail of breadcrumbs." Judge Moore, who now looked at Julian with a mixture of respect and outright fear, took one look at his argument and approved our motion in full. Lena was legally compelled to turn over her entire financial life. She thought she was clever. She thought her secret accounts and careful spending were hidden. She had no idea she was dealing with a man who employed a team of forensic accountants, the kind who usually untangle international money laundering schemes for his more interesting cases. These people could find a missing penny in a national deficit.
While Lena was drowning in a tsunami of paperwork, Julian opened a second front. He scheduled a series of depositions, not just with Lena, but with her inner circle. Her best friend, Sarah, her sister, Chloe, her fitness trainer, even her junior associates at the marketing firm where she worked. His strategy was psychological warfare. Apply pressure from every conceivable angle until the truth, like pus from a wound, was squeezed out. The first major breakthrough came during the deposition of Sarah, Lena's fiercely loyal best friend. Sarah was a sharp, confident woman who clearly saw this as her duty to protect her friend. She was no match for my brother. For 2 hours, Julian was polite, charming, almost conversational. He asked her about Lena's state of mind, her spending habits, her happiness in our marriage. Sarah held her own, painting a picture of an unfulfilled wife married to a boring, unambitious man. Then Julian shifted. "Miss Tremblay," he said, his voice losing none of its pleasantness, "can you tell me about a man named Robert Vance?" I saw Sarah flinch. The name meant nothing to me. Sarah tried to play dumb. "I'm not sure who you're referring to." Julian didn't press. He simply produced a stack of credit card statements from an account I never knew existed, a platinum card linked to our joint savings, an account Lena had been quietly siphoning from for over a year. He pointed to a series of charges, highlighted in yellow. A weekend at the Silverado Resort in Napa, a purchase from Tiffany & Co., numerous dinners at the French Laundry for 2. On these dates, according to her initial filings, Mrs. Croft was at a wellness retreat in Arizona. Her employer has no record of such time off. Your own credit card statements show you were in San Francisco. So I will ask you again, under oath, who is Robert Vance? Sarah's confidence crumbled. The penalty of perjury is a powerful motivator. Her shoulders slumped. She admitted it.
Robert Vance was a wealthy commercial real estate developer Lena had met through a client over 18 months ago. He was the reason for the new lingerie, the sudden work trips, the distant look in her eye I had mistaken for stress. It all clicked into place with the sickening finality of a tomb door slamming shut. The secrecy, the financial demands, the cold, calculated confidence. She wasn't just leaving me. She was monetizing our marriage to fund her launch into a new, upgraded life with a wealthier man. Our joint savings were meant to be her landing pad. The deposition of Robert Vance himself was even more illuminating. He was smug, arrogant, and used to getting his way. His arrogance lasted about 10 minutes under Julian's relentless, surgical questioning. He didn't yell. He simply laid out a timeline backed by phone records, hotel receipts, and restaurant reservations. He cornered him with his own words. Vance, realizing his reputation and his own marriage were now on the line, crumbled. He admitted to the affair. He admitted that he and Lena had planned the divorce strategy together. He even admitted, with a stunning lack of self-awareness, it was his idea for her to demand the house and spousal support. He told her a guy like him, a teacher, wouldn't have the resources to fight it. He said, as if it were the most logical thing in the world, it was just smart business. They had underestimated me. They had underestimated the quiet man. And they had catastrophically underestimated the bond of family they thought they had broken. With these depositions, Lena's case wasn't just weakened, it was atomized. She had committed perjury in her initial filings by swearing she was a faithful spouse. She had hidden assets and misappropriated marital funds. She was exposed as a liar and a fraud. That evening, my phone rang. It was Julian. He said, "Pritchard just called. He says Lena is willing to drop all her demands and just walk away clean."
"What did you say?" I asked, my heart pounding. Julian's reply was ice. I told him no. Walking away is a privilege reserved for those who act in good faith. She has not earned that privilege. We are not settling. We are going to court, and we are going to burn her entire scheme to the ground. She had wanted a fight. Now she had an unwinnable war. It has been 6 months since I first walked into that courtroom, a hollowed-out man who believed he had lost everything. Today, I can tell you I was wrong. I didn't lose anything that was truly mine. In fact, I gained back far more than I had ever lost. The final court date was a mere formality, a coronation of a victory already won. Faced with the mountain of irrefutable evidence, the depositions, the forensic accounting that traced $68,500 of our money spent on her affair, the proof of her conspiracy to defraud me, Lena had no choice. Her lawyer, a broken and defeated version of the smug man I'd first met, advised her to accept any terms we offered. Fighting would only make the inevitable judgment worse. And the terms Julian drafted were not just victorious, they were poetic in their justice. Lena was forced to relinquish any and all claim to our house. Her demand for spousal support was dismissed with prejudice, meaning she could never ask for it again. And because Julian had so meticulously proven her dissipation of marital assets, the judge ordered that the full $68,500 be deducted from her share of our remaining savings and returned to me. She was also ordered to pay a portion of my legal fees. She left the marriage with less than 20% of what she had initially demanded, a staggering amount of her own legal debt to Pritchard, and the profound public humiliation of having her entire sordid scheme laid bare in a public court record. The fallout in her personal life was swift and brutal. Robert Vance, faced with the potential exposure to his own wife and the social ruin of being named as a co-conspirator in such a tawdry plot, dumped Lena immediately. He was a man who valued winning above all else, and Lena had become the very embodiment of spectacular public failure. Her friends, many of whom had been dragged into the mess and forced to testify, distanced themselves from the toxicity. Her reputation in her professional circle was left in tatters. She lost her husband, her home, her savings, her lover, and her standing, all in one fell swoop, all because she made the fatal error of mistaking kindness for weakness and family bonds for broken bridges. But the real story, the one that truly matters, happened away from the courtroom. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, Julian called me. "Meet me at the old house," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. I drove out there, the familiar route stirring up a whirlwind of old emotions.
The Victorian looked a little sadder, a little more weathered, but it still stood with a kind of stubborn grace. I found Julian not inside, but on the back porch, sitting on the steps, 2 cups of coffee steaming beside him. We didn't talk about the case. We didn't talk about Lena. We talked about our father's legendary inability to fix a leaky faucet and our mother's secret recipe for chocolate chip cookies that involved a dash of espresso. We talked about the time we tried to build a treehouse and it collapsed, and we laughed for what felt like the first time in years. Finally, after a long, comfortable silence, he looked at me, his usually sharp eyes soft. "He was wrong, Danny," he said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "I was so focused on the asset, on the bottom line, that I forgot what this place really was. It's our home. It's where we became us. I was wrong." Tears pricked at my eyes. "I was wrong too, Jules," I admitted. "I was so stuck in the past, in preserving a memory, that I wasn't willing to see a different future for it. Maybe you were right. Maybe it shouldn't just be a museum." We didn't sell the house. We decided to keep it. Together. We've spent the last few weekends out there, just the 2 of us. We're repairing the sagging porch steps, we're scraping off old paint and putting on new. We're bringing it back to life, not as a shrine to the past, but as a project for our future. A place for our real family, the one defined by bond, not blood, to gather. A place for his kids, and maybe one day mine. Working side by side with my brother, the smell of sawdust and fresh paint filling the air has healed a wound I thought would be a scar forever. The 5 years of silence now feel like a bad dream. Lena's parting shot was that I couldn't afford a lawyer. Her greed, her arrogance, her belief that I was weak and alone was the very catalyst that forced me to make the call that brought my brother back into my life. She thought she was isolating me. Instead, she reunited me with the most important ally I will ever have. She tried to leave me with nothing. But as I stand here today in the workshop of my own home, the deeds secure in my safe, with my brother a phone call away, I realize I have everything. I have my home, I have my peace, and I have my family back. The price of her underestimation was everything she held dear. The reward from my resilience was a fortune she could never comprehend.